Evening, everyone. We've obviously got to speak in the microphone as usual, but we've got a change of agenda tonight. We're moving our leisure presentation forward to item number 7. So on that basis, we'll get on. First agenda item. We are looking for a vice chairman. Does anyone have a nomination for the appointment of the vice chair? Now, I would like to propose Sue Nichols, Councillor Sue Nichols. Could I please have a seconder?
I'll be very pleased to second your proposal.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you. Please, could we have a show of hands? Those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. So welcome on board. Unfortunately, there's no chain of office for this, but but thank you. Apologies for absence.
So we have apologies from Councillors Deering, Walcombe, Wilcox, and also from our independent person, Mark Poppy.
Thank you very much. Before us, we have the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of April. Are members content for me as chairman to sign these minutes? And can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Sue. And a seconder? Thank you, Jeffrey. Could I have a show of hands? Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. There's nothing to announce this week, unfortunately. Obviously, welcome to Sue. May it be a very joyful year, and I will definitely take one session out so you can take over. Thank you. So agenda item 6, data protection update. Oh, sorry, 5, declaration of interest. I'm getting ahead of myself there. Has anyone got any declaration of interest for any of the agenda items today? No, thank you. Agenda item 6 now, data protection update. Tyron,
yeah,
is that you?
Yeah, that is me. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
And good evening, councillors. To those I haven't met, I think I've met everyone around the table. I'm Tyron Sutters, Information Governance and Data Protection Manager, and the Council's Data Protection Officer. The report before you tonight is an update, my regular update on reported data breaches and subject access requests through the period from the 1st of October 24 to the 1st of April 25. The report is to note and then provide any observations to me. So over that reporting period, we had a total of 11 data breaches reported. That's 3 less than the last reporting period, none of which were deemed serious enough to report to the Information Commissioner, which is excellent. That means none of them posed any harm, be it emotional, financial, reputational, etc., to any of the data subjects. The causes in the report, you'll see there 9 were due to emails being sent to incorrect recipients, the most common that we have. 1 was due to a data transfer where data was being moved from the council servers to the new Beam/Hartford Theatres servers. And then 1 was due to an incorrect publication on the council's planning portal. So we took loads of sort of immediate actions, apologies and notifications. So we issued apologies where this was deemed appropriate to the data subjects and informed them too. Sometimes that's not appropriate because it may cause more distress than what it's worth. Recipient actions, where incorrect recipients were sent information, we asked them to destroy the data and let us know via email once that was done. Staff reminders and training, we advised responsible staff who were responsible for data breaches to retake the data protection e-learning. Just to note there that following presentation of this report to leadership team, we've updated that to make that training now mandatory for staff who are responsible for human breaches and that human error breaches, and that's reflected in the council's updated data breach policy, which is great. On the planning portal, that was due to a software error, so a breach that shouldn't have occurred. We were able to rectify that and remove that data. It was just low level name and surname sort of data, so it wasn't anything high risk in there. Other preventative measures, including sort of updating processes where relevant, seeking assurance from software providers wherever breaches were due to software issues, and of course, attempted email recalls wherever this was likely. On the trends, the number of breaches remains acceptable, particularly given the amount of personal data. You can imagine the council processes every single day. And it's also a good indication that staff are effectively recognizing and reporting breaches, which is good. We're sort of at that fine line, we sort of don't want we don't want zero unreported breaches, because then there's the risk that they're not being reported. We don't want too many either. I suppose the important aspect is that we're learning from these breaches and implementing any actions. Also good to note that there was a I've lost the word. Sorry, the council's data breach responses, the incidents were audited, that's the word, in October 24, and we received substantial assurance in that area, which is great. We only had 2 low priority recommendations, and these have now been actioned through the council's updated data breach policy. On subject access requests, we received 11. It's quite a few more than the previous period. There were probably 6 more or so, but those were all processed within the statutory 1-month time limit. So yes, that's all from me. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much there. Does any member have any questions or comments? Sue, thank you.
Hello, it's good to hear that there are very few breaches. I wonder how that compares to other local authorities.
I'd have to check with my colleagues, but that is probably the norm. Anything more than 20 would raise concern, but I think we're sort of on the same level. But like I said before, the important aspects is that we're putting in actions and learning from the breaches. But yeah, I will check with colleagues throughout to check, but I'm pretty sure we're at the acceptable level.
Okay, and I wondered how the training videos that staff and members have been involved in viewing, how that has affected the number of breaches, if that's has a positive, there was a reduction from last year. I wonder if you can see from the data if that's had a positive influence.
I suppose it's it'd be difficult to say whether it's had an effect. I suppose the positivity of that is that the breaches are being reported. So before, sort of, there were a lot less, sort of 2 or 3 over a 6-month period, which is very suspicious. Like I said before, we don't want too many, so difficult to say, but I suppose the positivity is that people are more aware of how to report breaches, how to recognize them too, because before people weren't recognizing what personal data was, and that was sort of going unnoted. So yeah, that's sort of the positivity of those, as you say, the videos and the training. No worries.
Thank you very much. Any more questions, Nick?
Yeah, just one question. You may have answered this in your introductory remarks in terms of the training. Is it mandatory for staff to have the data training? I mean, I think you mentioned those who incur a breach.
So yes, it's an annual mandatory training that forms part of all staff's PDR, and then yes, if staff are responsible for a breach, they then have to retake it and sort of prove that they have done it. So yes, that is mandatory.
Thank you. Any more questions? I think I've got one though.
Oh yeah.
So on residents, whether it's online or emails, have voiced a concern, and I don't know how significant that is, about the need to put in details, personal details, to find out about the bin cycle. That's the changes that are coming up. Now, is there any increased threat around that we need to concern ourselves with?
So any sort of threat, so this is in terms of residents and putting their details, understand when their bins will be collected. The initial sort of risk maybe, do we need that data in the first place? So that would be picked up through what's called a data protection impact assessment, where we'd sort of evaluate that process against the GDPR's key principles, for the one being necessity. And if it is the necessary, then we'll sort of run through that assessment as to how we reduce that risk, sort of security we can put in place, the amount of actual data we need to accomplish that purpose too. That would be followed up by privacy notices, the process being recorded in the council's record of processing activity, etc. All these accountability, which is again another GDPR principle where we're showing how we're complying with it. That would then further reduce that risk. So so I suppose in terms of any risk, my initial assessment would be, do we need to do that in the first place? And what is the least amount of data that we need to do that?
Thank you very much. Brian.
Thank you, Chair. Brian Malden, Director of Finance, Risk and Performance. Just on that point, it has been raised at leadership team, and we have been advised that we are moving away from that process, and should, in the future, people should be able to just access that without having to register.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So no more questions? No more comments? Okay, on that basis then, there's one. Oh, sorry, Chris.
It seems a bit of a small point, but obviously, because it sounds like the problem's going to be rectified, because actually, yeah, and it is an onerous form and way too intrusive just to know when your bins are going to be collected. And you're right, it kind of starts begging questions: why are we collecting all this data, and what would we do with it? And it also increases our exposure to losing data if we had a serious cyber attack of some description. I just kind of wondered why that process wasn't done in the first place, because although we are rectifying it in retrospect, it's also a lot of work to do that. Whereas if we just basically had something a bit more sensible to begin with, then we probably would have saved ourselves a lot of time, valuable staff time, and probably money as well.
Yeah, so I suppose the answer there was it should have come to me sooner. I suppose it's kind of perhaps missed that point, because, as I've said, had it come to me, I would have picked up, and that would have been the first question as to what sort of why data needs to be collected anyway. So I suppose this answer the question should have come to me sooner, but good to hear it's been rectified regardless, and that data won't be collected, because that would have then been the step too far in rectifying that and getting rid of that data and sort of re-looking at the process.
Thank you. There is one recommendation for us, and that is the committee notes the content of the report and provides any observations to the Information Governance and Data Protection Manager. Could I please have a proposer and a seconder for this? Jeffrey, thank you very much. And Sue, thank you for seconding. Could we have a show of hands? Those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. That is carried. We have now the item which has been brought forward. Let me go to this, sorry. This is the previous agenda item 12, the annual leisure contract performance report. Is that you, Sarah? Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chair. So we're now in the we're in the 6th year of a 15-year contract with SLM, or Everyone Active, and the report due to be presented to you this evening looks back over the year 2024. And just by way of introduction, I mean, there's a lot of positives within the report that I'm sure Dan will discuss, including, I believe, 1.6 million visitors to the leisure centres over the year, and some significant increases in new users, which is really positive. It's it's kind of a sad year as well, because we know that following the ending of the Department for Educational funding to Leventhorpe and Fanshawe, unfortunately those facilities did have to close at the end of last year, and I just want to acknowledge that there was a huge amount of effort in the community and by ward councillors and also by our MP to see if that money could be restored or if another solution could be found. And I know that efforts are ongoing with Fanshawe between a community group there and the town council. So hopefully there can still be a future for that facility. But returning to the work that's taking place by SLM, along with additional users, there was also a lot of work to try and transfer users from Fanshawe and Leventhorpe to our other 2 facilities. And fortunately, quite a few users were able to be transferred, so that was positive. And in terms of wider work, there was also a relaunch of the exercise on referral scheme. There's been dedicated programs to support seniors and a wellbeing program, and including a Parkinson's program, which enables people diagnosed with Parkinson's to access the facilities due to the huge benefits of physical activity in terms of managing that condition. So there's some really positive activities taking place. But rather than me go on, I will hand you over to Dan for the full report. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I think you've pretty much covered everything, so we can call it a day. Thank you very much for the time to come and talk to you guys about what we do in the ledger contract. We've kind of broken it down into some very broad topics. As Sarah was saying, we focus a lot in terms of numbers and people. Obviously, we're a very broad community in East Hart, stretching far and wide. From a social value, this is something that since post-COVID, the industry has embraced. We're now seeing returns of a prediction of £6.7 million worth of social value being generated through users in the leisure centre. We share that information with a company called Full Global and the Moving Communities, which looks at the users in terms of their demographics, their postcode analysis, and how active they are with us. It will come as no shock to anybody that the more active that you are, the more social value that you generate. This year, or in 2024, we generated per person £179, which is an increase of £22 per person from 2023. In terms of unique users, as Sarah was saying, we've seen a 7.8% increase in unique users. So there are 37,895 unique users that are using the centres, whether they're coming once a week or 4 or 5 times a week, which is brilliant to see. From a staffing perspective, we're nothing but the service that we provide from the colleagues that we've got. 57% of our colleagues are female. 90% of those colleagues live in East Hart. We've done a number of things over the last couple of years in terms of training colleagues for free, generating swim teachers. We also operate a Sporting Champions programme, which is in its 6th year. There are 24 local athletes that are on that scheme that benefit from receiving free access to the centre, and they also get quarterly coaching workshops with athletes from Colin Jackson. I get his name wrong, but Luto Mohammed, who was a Taekwondo expert, and they get coaching and generating in terms of how they kind of build their profile as an athlete and focusing in terms of what they're doing. From a local residents perspective, 75% of our users come from the local community. That's an increase of 2.3%. We were at 35 different local partnerships, 44 local schools, 19 different health groups from our exercise referral programme that Sarah very kindly has spoken very well about. And we work with 72 local clubs for dry side activities, whether that's football, whether that's tennis. From a supported memberships perspective, Sarah's already mentioned that the Parkinson's membership that we've got an amazing crowd at Grange Paddocks where every month they meet and have a support afternoon where they have tea, coffee, cakes, talk about how they're progressing. But we find that has grown by 32 people over the last 12 months. Actually, today at Hartham, we've launched a very similar scheme to try and get more people in the south of the borough involved in that. For Parkinson's, what they find is that there is no greater medication than physical activity, and quite often from the medical side of things, their medication is kind of hit and miss, but they know if they remain active, that help kind of prolongs their long-term medical prognosis. So on the next slide, we talk about participation. As Sarah mentioned, we've achieved 1.6 million visits, which is 17.5% an increase, which is 247,000 more than what we did in the previous year. What we've seen is that the investment over the last 4 years in terms of the new facilities at Grange Paddocks, which believe it or not are 5 years old this year, Hartham as well, has seen a massive increase in terms of gym users, but most welcomely, we've seen an increase in terms of casual swimming users. Sarah mentioned the exercise referral scheme. In the calendar year 24, we've had 106 referrals. We've had 57 of those remain on the scheme, and 92% of those people are still using the scheme at the end of their 12 to 16 weeks, which is a really positive thing. 21 of those referrals are about hypertension. We've got some really great partnerships that we've teamed up with. Most promisingly this year, we've teamed up with Lee Wolf in Hartford, where we're actually now offering to their patients 2 free activity sessions a week, soon to be 4 in June. In terms of disability users, we've seen a 64% increase in disability users. That's massively increased from the figures in 2013. The same with BME groups. Group exercises are an activity that we focused on a lot. Whilst when I decide to go to the gym, I say it will be about 10 o'clock when I decide to go. I know that if I've booked myself a group exercise class, that class starts at 10 o'clock, whether I'm there or not. So we tend to find that engages people a lot more. What we've found, certainly in the last 12 months, that's increased by 42%, and we've probably put on another 56 classes in the last 12 months. The gym attendance, that's massively grown by 42% over the last 12 months, and we're now seeing over 500,000 visits from group exercise attendances alone. In terms of total participation, the kind of graph just gives you a very good balance in relation to where we are. Obviously, with the closure of Ward Freeman in 2003, we start to see a little bit of that data tail off. But to give you a context in terms of what we're looking at, there's there's a 17% increase in terms of where we are from year on year. So we are seeing attendances increase, typically in that first graph on the top left, as we kind of expect. That kind of tails off between January, until we get to January where it picks back up again. On the next slide, we talk about target groups and young people. So what we tend to do as a benchmark is look at our total attendance increasing by 17.5%. We are a little bit limited in terms of what we can do for young adults. The focus is mainly around the aquatics activity. So in the 2 segmentations that we kind of focus on, which is 5 to 16, we've seen a 5.9% increase. And then from 5 to 24, we've kind of seen that that's grown, as will be reflected in the gym usage that we've got from there. On the next slide, we talk about the target populations around older adults. We mentioned that 17.5% was the benchmark that we've seen in total populations. Most welcomely, we've seen that increase dramatically across all age ranges. Now, as Sarah said, we've set ourselves up with various different programs. We've now got a wellness program. We've now got a senior program, and that's encouraging people that might not necessarily want to go into a high impact aerobics class or a body pump class to look at doing something different and understand that there are lots of different things for lots of different people to do in our leisure centres and outside of our centres. We've kind of gone through the various different bits about the non-residents. From an aquatics perspective on the next slide, we're in a situation there where we've seen that gentle increase. Year on year, there's a comparison where it's slightly down, but if you take into consideration there's 3,723 swimmers from Ward Freeman that aren't there in 24 that were there before, like for like, looking at the sites that remained open in 24, it's a 1.6% increase in terms of aquatics. On the next slide, we look at aquatics by that. So we've kind of broken on the first slide the total participation, where naturally we see less pool facilities means there are less people using the pool. Removing that data and just looking at it on a like-for-like basis, typically we are seeing slight increases in terms of under 16s. Adult swimming is something that we've seen that is slightly down. It's down by 1.8%, which is only 2,530 people. But we're also seeing senior swimming coming back in. So our programs that we've introduced, like quiet swims, good boost sessions that are kind of targeted to be more social inclusion projects where people can get a coffee, exercise in their own time without necessarily having to do too much lane swimming. On the next slide, it's just a general overview in terms of how we promote and what we do to kind of talk about aquatics. So I mentioned Good Boost. AI seems to be a buzzword. I think that was something that we spoke about last year. Good Boost is a program that's tailored using AI for musculoskeletal problems. So if you've got a bad back, we welcome you down at any point that you'd like to come along, Councillor Hart. That will give you a workout that can strengthen your back or not lift furniture. Indeed. 2024 saw Grange Paddocks hold the first Pride Swim in Hertfordshire. We, very sadly, the article in the bottom right hand side is a picture of the London Aquatic Centre. Whilst Grange Paddocks is a fantastic centre, sadly I know that is the London Aquatic Centre and not Grange Paddocks. That was hugely popular in terms of seeing people come in and brought a very different user base in terms of what we were doing before, and it's a fantastic thing just to see the community come together. Next month, and again last year in June, is Drowning Prevention Week. So obviously being surrounded by a number of local rivers, we get out into the local community and talk about drowning preventions and how people can be safe on the beachfront and around the poolside in terms of summer. So there's some illustrations in terms of some colleagues going to Abel Smith School. Next month, we've got planned 2 weeks where we'll be talking to all of the children that come to our education swimming sessions and our after school swimming sessions about being able to identify what the flags on the beach mean and don't mean. And then for some of the older children, granted my son's 4, I don't think he quite understands what a riptide is, but what they need to do and where they need to swim to be safe. We've also introduced more inflatable swimming sessions. We tend to program that slightly differently. Previously, we'd have had the same sessions on the same Saturday and Sunday afternoon. They're now intertwined in a program where they'll be in a block for one day. Typically, Grange Products and Harton rotate this round. It will be the last weekend of the month. The idea being is it creates a little bit of rarity in terms of what we've got, something that people can come in and do. Nowadays, the pool inflatable is quite a feat to behold, and they've got life jackets, which is akin to something that you might see at Westmoor Farm or somewhere else in terms of the activities they've done. We have a big thing in terms of adult swimming, so we revamped our adult swimming program to focus in terms of, well, no one really wants to be called a beginner, so we now have be a better swimmer and be a more confident swimmer, and we're focused in terms of making sure we tell stories of real people as opposed to the stock images that you may or may not see in terms of some of our marketing. We also do a number of things in terms of swimathon, and then on the next slide we can talk about fitness attendances. So typically larger facilities mean that we've got more opportunity for those people to be active. This year, certainly in 2025, I think we'll be certainly close to 600,000 visits in terms of the gym. Last year we achieved just over 500,000, which is a 41% increase. Whilst I don't think we're going to see that same 41% increase, we know that certainly at the moment it's very busy in terms of what we're doing. We spoke very earlier about the group exercise improvements, and we're finding that tying our programs in terms of with general wellness, one of the things that we did last year is we had a huge focus around mental health. So we introduced 3 seated exercise classes with a focus on meditation. The timings typically were not amazing, but we found that those sessions have been hugely well attended, and the demand for seated exercise is something that we're looking at taking out into the community. On the next slide, you'll get an idea in terms of some of the things that we kind of communicate. So we've got various different things mentioned about the mind, health and body. We've also got member testimonials. So people talking about how and what they use, as well as having a quarterly group exercise revamp of our program so that people get involved in that. That's been hugely successful. We've also started to be involved in terms of some more things like the mind body sound bath sessions that we've got advertised in the bottom right hand corner, as well as a focus in terms of charity aqua. One of the things that we have got is a shortage of aqua teachers, so if anybody wants an aqua teacher job, please let me know at the end. But one of the things that we're seeing is that we've got a huge demand for people to be doing aqua in the pool spaces that we've got. One of the things that we're planning to do this year is we're working with a company called HydroHex, and we will be introducing a virtual aqua offering at Grange Products, where there'll be a 90-inch screen where people can use certain times at the learner pool where it's not necessarily as busy to do aqua classes in addition to the classes that are taught by instructors. On the next slides, we talk about our membership schemes. So from a membership perspective, we've seen a 1.4% growth from 2023. From the Learn to Swim scheme, we have naturally seen a drop, there being 4 pools in the contract as opposed to 5. Naturally, some of that drop is coming from the impact of Wall Freeman closing, but we're also in that situation that what we've tended to find is that post-COVID, our average length of stay is between 18 months and 24 months on the Learn to Swim scheme, and we're having a real focus in terms of trying to make sure that people make sure that their child is competent and not necessarily too confident in the water. There's a big difference between being able to swim competently as opposed to being very confident around the water. We've also introduced at the start of the contract a swim only membership, and again that's kind of growing from growth to growth, with 261 swimmers on that scheme, more than what we had in 261 swimmers on the scheme. In terms of operational, we have quite a robust customer feedback that is linked to how customers respond. So every time customer comes into the centre, every 6 months they're sent a post-user survey. In that post-user survey, it will be broken down into fitness experience, value for money, the satisfaction of the visit, the net promoter score, and whether people feel that it's benefited them using the centre, as well as a focus on active travel and their swim experience. The general overview, we've seen a number of positive improvements. The investment in terms of the fitness side of things has seen that score grow by 7.9%. We've seen a slight drop in terms of value for money. Naturally, in terms of Hartum opened in October, get my dates right, 23. October 24, unfortunately, there were a number of members that joined on a price freeze. That price freeze ended, and we kind of believe that's some of the impact that we've seen there, which is then impacted in visitor satisfaction. We are seeing people see a real benefit to coming to the centre. Positively, we've seen an improvement in terms of cleanliness satisfaction. And in terms of what we've got from an operation on the next slide, we had 114 accidents. Whilst that does sound like quite a lot, what we do is we break that down by accidents per 10,000 visits. Now, what we've actually seen is we've had less accidents per 10,000 visits than we did in the previous year, which is a positive. We would love to be in a situation that there's 0 accidents, but having seen how busy the centres have been this half term with a very rainy weather forecast, it's somewhat difficult to achieve at the best of time. We have a focus in terms of digital drive, so we've got a very comprehensive app. 85% of our customer transactions are via the app or online. So whether that's booking, whether that's an inquiry about their membership, whether that's a general feedback and inquiry. Due to that digital drive, we have seen a number of, we have seen our benchmark for feedback per 10,000 visits increase by just under 9%. Generally, we have seen more feedback coming through. People have got very confident in terms of using the feedback, and we'll get a mixture in terms of inquiries of probably about 1,000 a month coming through. In terms of funding applications, we put in for 3 funding applications. We weren't necessarily successful for those. From a staff perspective, we've introduced 4 apprenticeships that are still with us. We have seen 7 internal promotions and 4 people attend leadership training, which this year is going to increase to 6. On the next slide, we talk about environmental impact. Now, there is some context to the conversations that we've got there. Whilst we have seen an increase in solar, it would be remiss of me not to point out that Hartum solar wasn't in full effect in 2023, so you would naturally expect there to be a 315% increase. From an electricity perspective, we've also seen the impact of the change of heating profile at Hartum, where we've now got an air source heat pump, which has seen the electricity increase. That's yet to kick in terms of a gas thing. What we have seen is an impact around our environmental side of things, and that's certainly an area that we are focusing on as managers to kind of improve as we go on. The same in terms of our recycling rate. We have ambitions to try and get towards 40%. Last year, very sadly, the back end of the quarter, we saw a drop in terms of recycling rates. Whilst we were averaging mid-30s, quarter 4 for us last year, that dropped to below 26%. On the next slide, we talk about social value. Now, I won't necessarily go into the details on that, but that breaks that down in terms of what that's perceived social value. This isn't necessarily something that we come up with. This is all the information that's sent off to Full Global and the Moving Communities Group. Very positively, we are seeing those numbers increase in terms of a 7% increase in unique social visits. And then that's broken down by the slides in terms of different people. On the next slide, it breaks down the perceived social value in terms of physical, mental health benefits, subjective well-being in terms of the improvements in people's lives, and the various different health indicators that helps to increase. On the next slide, it will very talk about in terms of the number of active users. What we've seen is that we've seen an increase in the number of people that are active. So active users are people that are doing over 150 minutes per week. Fairly active are people that are doing anywhere less than 150 minutes per week. That's positive that we're seeing that impact, and that's hugely impacted by some of the programs that we've kind of launched over the last 12 to 18 months in terms of the exercise referral, our wellbeing programs, and our focus in terms of around well-being and mental health. On the next slide, it's broken down into more detail in terms of how that is, and that's just more of an illustration in terms of the impact of how we're seeing more people being active in our community. On the next slide, we talk about our community and health and wellbeing programs. So every November, we have a campaign called Age is Just a Number. And very pleasingly this year, one of our Harton members, Neil Blake, was chosen to be one of the, I don't know whether you can use the word poster boy anymore, but one of the campaign figureheads for that. Neil's 90, he swims 30 times, he swims 13 times a week at the centre. He's probably at the centre much more than I am. He's truly an inspiration. He rides his bike into the centre and is a very well-known character. We have various different campaigns. We spoke about the seated Pilates classes over the summer, and we're planning to do the same again this year. We have a campaign called Everyone is Family, where we will have between 8 to 12 sessions a week that are £2 for families to attend. The idea being is to attract a different type of user, become affordable, and be in a situation that we attract people that might not necessarily be able to afford coming to the swimming pool. What we've done at Grange Paddocks, which is a couple of slides that we've got there, we've introduced a reading corner. It sounds very unlike what should happen in a leisure centre, but after swimming lessons, when your child is very active, it's very good to sit them down with a book. And we've now started to generate a bit of a community cafe off the back of this, where they will sit, engage and play. At half terms, we host various different arts and craft sessions to kind of keep them engaged so that it becomes a full morning activity in the centre. And then on the second slide, it's just more in terms of what we've done from a community cafe, whether that's bake sales, whether that's member engagement meetings. And in the bottom right hand corner is some of the work that we've done with Lee Wharf. And that is probably a bit longer than I promised Brian it would be.
Thank you very much, Dan. That's excellent, and I think hopefully there'll be a few questions about things. Members, any questions or comments you would like to know a bit more? Oh, sorry, Joe.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to get it started. So I think just a couple of really quick questions. One, I think it's great. Those numbers are fantastic. I know lots of members here, myself included, have been advocates to help. The council should be promoting fitness, health and wellbeing through our Thriving Together initiative. Maybe I missed it in your numbers, but the numbers have gone up. That's really good. How much more headroom have we got? Like how much more could we get from the facilities that you run? Are there capacity or is there more? That's the first question.
It's a very difficult question to answer. In terms of, obviously Sarah spoke at the start of the conversation about the loss of Fanshawe and Leventhorpe, and certainly what we've seen is that we've needed to rejig some of the pool programs to accommodate some of those swimmers. At Grange Paddocks, we're seeing those swimmers stay. So we're seeing that swim scheme kind of thrive above the numbers that if I'm going to be brutally honest, I'd have never expected it to have. Obviously, that places peripheral challenges in terms of the facilities. The car parking is something that is not a conversation that I'd want to get into in any real depth, but we're obviously now seeing more people coming in, and whilst we are as creative as we can be, people want to take their swimming between, well, people want to take their children swimming between 4 and 6 and between 8 and 11 on a weekend. At the same time, football want to be in, at the same time, people want to come to a thing. So we are kind of seeing that we're probably at a peak capacity. And one of the things that we need to do as an operator is look at how we diversify that. So some of the things that we've been looking at over the last 12 months and that we're hopeful that we're going to take this forward this year is looking at getting out into the community a little bit more, getting towards the people that going to the gym is just not something that they ever consider. So this year we started 2 programs at Lee Wharf. We've had a very good working relationship with Lee Wharf, and they very gently allowed us to come in and provide 2 seated exercise classes for their patients who have long-term conditions. We do 1 mind-body session for their staff. I say next month, but it's only 3 days away. We're starting 2 walks with them. So there will be a midwife on one of the walks, and one of the things that we're looking for is other venues to do that. So we're talking with the relationships that we've built with some of the primary care networks to see how much more we can kind of get out into that local community and do that. I don't know how best to answer the rest of the question in terms of capacity. Yes, the gym is busy at 6 o'clock on a Monday night. It would be amazing to have bigger facilities, but
Those of, I don't know how gyms work, but like, is there a maximum number of members that you could take onto your books, and are we, or not? And if there is, are we anywhere near that? Or is it not really how it works?
how best to answer that question? There is obviously a maximum number, and people vote for their feet. So if they can't get onto the gym kit, they don't stay a member. So we offer a no contract membership. So when people join us on a membership basis, they pay for their final month membership up front. They're not tied into a 12-month contract. That means that they've still got to pay in 2026, even if they don't live in the area. So we are trying to do as much as we can to make sure that we maximise the space that we've got. So I think we're going to see the numbers probably flatline for a while. And obviously with the loss of the facilities at Fanshawe and Lumthorpe, some of the swim numbers are going to be impacted in the fact that there's just less pools around. You know, there isn't the water space to accommodate all the swimmers that we would like to. In terms of the gym, we have a £600,000 refurb planned for this August, which, well, I guess that's now public, haven't been said in this forum. And one of the things that we've done is that we've worked with a company called, I'm going to say the wrong company, I'm going to say Gym Metrics, and it's not them, and I'm going to give someone else the credit. We've had for a month in January, someone put sensors on every bit of gym kit at Grange Paddocks. Now, that's told me things that in 25 years of working in the industry, I never thought was true. So it's told us how often people use it, what the heat mapping of the area is. Pressure is the new Grange Paddocks has been designed with that in mind and maximising what people want. So one of the feedback that came out of that is that there was a perception that we needed to increase the gym at Grange Paddocks by about 100 square metres. That's just physically not possible. Just not possible. So we're in a situation that we're just looking at making sure that we make the most effective use of the spaces that we've got.
And then the second question was, and it's meant in the tone of being a constructive friend, but it's really good that we've got younger generations now wanting to go to the gym, which perhaps wasn't so much the case when I was a teenager. But I do know for some residents, one of them I have to declare an interest. He is my son,
Yeah.
But a group of his friends. I think when he was 14 at the time, there's a limit to how many of that age group you'll allow in at a certain time. And I think parents were having trouble booking their children on to those sessions. And my son and other children, whose friends have now migrated to John Warner. So it's just really, as I say, being in the interest of being constructive. Are you kind of aware of that issue? Has anyone else brought it to your attention, and is it something you've given any thought to?
Yeah. More than aware of some of the issues in terms of that. So we've now kind of changed. We've worked with UK Active and gone on the guidance that we've kind of been given as an industry. So now we can look at different ages at different times, which means that whereas before, if you were 11 to 16, you were kind of all lumped in the same pot. Now we've kind of diversified that at different age groups in terms of different capacities. There's still an over demand for young people between 11 and 15 to access the gym. And that's probably a demand that we will probably struggle to meet all the time. We've kind of limited that now, so we're not selling that online, so that we're just necessarily trying to control what we've got with the people that are paying for that to do that. Equally, now in that post-user survey, we get the flip side of it, that people don't always want to work out when there are younger people in the gym, but it's trying to find that balance in terms of what we do and how we do that for everyone else. One of the things that we are looking at, and at the moment we are working at how we progress that, is to see whether there's the opportunity to do exercise classes for younger people. The difficulty is that what we find in the gym they want to do what everyone else is doing, not necessarily a watered down version that is for teenagers.
Thank you very much.
Jeffrey, and then Sue. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thanks to Sarah and to Dan for the amazing presentation. Lots of good news, lots of stories of success, all very impressive. What I'd just like to pick up on, Sarah mentioned in her introduction that a number of members from Leaventhorpe and Fanshawe have transferred to Branch Paddocks or Harton. But the report does say that 425 have chosen not to. So my question, I suppose, is, do we know how many members did transfer, and therefore what sort of proportion did and didn't? And with those 425, were there any efforts to try and entice them to, or what was the reason they didn't want to transfer? And was there any efforts made to try to overcome those objections?
I'll do my best to do your very excellent question justice. We do know the percentage of people that move from fitness. We do know the percentage of people that move from swimming. So that 400 is kind of a total of the two amalgamated together. From a swim perspective, and certainly what we've kind of found is it's comfort. I'm comfortable. My son swims at the same time. To disrupt that and come to a completely different centre, lots of people didn't necessarily want to do that. And when they've got to a certain stage in the conversation I mentioned earlier, where they feel that their child can swim 25 metres, appears to be very capable, but might not necessarily be competent in the water, decided to do other things, whether that's football, whether that's other things. We gave, people the option to transfer, but politely, depending on where you come from in Leaventhorpe, getting to Grange Paddocks is a distance. Similarly, at Fanshawe, getting into Hertford at times is not necessarily easy. So for some people, it just wasn't necessarily a practical decision for them to do that. For those that live on the right side of Sawbridgeworth and Ware, it's probably not been too much of an inconvenience for them. In terms of enticing those people from a membership perspective, we've held the same price that those customers paid at the sites at Fanshawe and Well. We've held that price for 12 months, so that's held until March 26. So they're paying the same price as what they would have been paying, which is substantially lower than what current Grange Paddocks members pay. Idea being is to try and encourage them to stay active. We don't want to be sitting there and it being a double whammy where you've now got to pay a different price and you've now got to travel further. And there's a number of associated things with that, where certainly from a swim perspective, I think that we found that a lot of the top end of the swim scheme, so where people were swimming close to 25 metres, didn't come across. The ones that are in the bottom end of the scheme that were just starting out, we found that there was a huge demand for those people coming across. And certainly what we've learned from our experience when we did it 12 months ago at Wolf Freeman, we find operationally it gives us challenges in 6 months' time because of that influx of people at the lower end of the scheme. Typically in January, we might have 100 new people starting swim lessons. This year, that number was double, treble in some cases, and they're all at a specific starting point in the scheme. So probably this month and next month, we're going to have challenges in terms of people moving up to the scheme, because naturally it's a pyramid where people get through that. From a fitness perspective, we've been very sensitive about it in terms of offering people that opportunity to do that. We're acutely aware it wasn't a popular decision, and I think everybody in would like it not to be so, but the reality is that it is. We've tried to encourage people by fixing that price for them for 12 months, and from a swim perspective, trying to make it as easy as we can, but logistically for some people, depending on where they lived, it just wasn't feasible for them to do that.
Let's come back. You said you did have numbers of people who transferred, but you didn't actually say what they were. So we know 425 didn't. So do you know what the number of people who did transfer?
Off the top of my head, no, I know what the percentages were.
Oh,
we
sorry.
found that,
Well, the
yeah, it's
percentage.
about 40% of the scheme at Leaventhorpe moved and about 60% of the scheme at Ware.
Okay, so let's call it around about half then.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sue? Yeah.
Thank you. I was going to ask a very similar question about people transferring from Buntingford to your leisure centres and whether you've got, if there was enough data to show where their preferred choices were, whether they were Hartham, Grange Paddocks or North Herts or Stevenage, and how many have failed to engage because of the difficulties in getting to other sites.
Yeah. We've since Wolf Freeman closed, we now work in partnership with North Herts Council. So what we tended to find is that people knew what the scheme offers. So we offer the same swim scheme in all of our sites, albeit with different instructors at different pools. So what we tended to find at Hartham, the preference was people that came to Ware. So we were actually in a situation, there were a number of swimmers that moved down from Buntingford to Ware because it was just easier to get off the A10 there as opposed to try and work your way through Benjo or through the town. And what we've probably found since then, the swimmers that we know that were based around Buntingford have probably moved back to North Herts.
That makes sense. And I've got a completely unrelated question about you've got very high energy consumption as leisure centres.
Yep.
I wonder if you have any offsetting ideas about encouraging active travel and sustainable transport to reduce car use and improve people's health by walking and cycling to your sites, and also a way of offsetting carbon use.
Yeah, I think it's still probably a national challenge for everyone to kind of encourage active users. One of the things that we've kind of seen, unfortunately, recently is the spate of bike fests. So, not answering your question in any real depth or terms, one of the things that we're doing at the moment is working a lot with the neighbourhood policing team to ensure that the people that do want to ride have got a bike to come back out to at the end of it. And we've had some very vociferous people steal things that have done it not discreetly. So we're working with the police to kind of encourage that. It is a challenge. What we'll do in the next report is talk about that active travel in terms of the breakdown of what we've got now. But yeah, we are working in terms of how we can do that as best as we can and encourage our staff to be more active in terms of active travel as well.
Chris?
Just a quick question, just to come back on the idea of the number of people that didn't transfer across.
Yeah.
How much of that was because there wasn't capacity to accommodate them? So, I mean, given that parents have a time frame that they have to work within. We all had young children at some point. I still have young children. So, how much of it is just it wasn't actually possible to accommodate these people? So there was a loss of service of in the order of 50% overall because we closed facilities.
In honesty, I don't think I can answer that question accurately. Think what we found was that people who were at the higher end of the scheme decided to do other things, certainly from a learn to swim perspective. We tried to meet the capacity as best as we could, but we're in a situation that effectively we needed to find about 600 to 700 extra spaces for swimmers at a lower end in the scheme, which will be a learner pool capacity or a very small kind of stage 2 or 3 in the main pool. So from a capacity perspective, I'm sure that there were customers that didn't necessarily want the times that they want. We have that now where Monday at 4 o'clock is probably a gold dust for some lessons, and the same with 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock on a Saturday. Whilst we've tried to put on more lessons, whilst we've tried to do that, it's I would be completely guessing if I sat and gave you a figure. I'm sure there were some people that didn't get the times that they wanted and didn't get the spaces that we wanted, but we did our level best to try and accommodate as many people as we can. So what we did once we knew the news came out was try and gauge an interest for them in terms of where they wanted to go, what their times were, so that we could do that. And I'm sure that there were probably, I'd like to say a minimum amount, but I can't quantify that in terms of numbers accurately to really put my name behind it.
the kind of the reason why I ask is obviously we're still trying to advocate to save Fanshawe to some degree, and I'm wondering how useful it would be to know how much capacity we weren't able to meet. So, because obviously if we're trying to advocate to retain resources and we're trying to do that with central government, then kids learning to swim is pretty vital because, you know, kids that don't learn to swim are at risk of drowning. So it's a good motivation to try and, if we had that kind of data that said what this is the maximum capacity we could offer, and this was the bit that we couldn't offer service to at all, just because we don't have sufficient facilities.
I'd actually look at it in a different way, because I kind of think the information that we've now talking about is 6 months old, so they're either swimming somewhere else or not. I'd look at it in terms of the demographic, in terms of the number of children that are kind of 4 to 7, 8 to 9, and be in a situation to see what that is in that locality in terms of drive time for Fanshawe. And I think that will probably give you a better understanding in terms of where there is in terms of a pool for people wanting to come in terms of swim. We know that there are people that did prefer swimming at the dual use sites. It was less busy. There wasn't lots of people coming to the gym. There wasn't hordes of people coming for exercise classes, and it provided a different opportunity to different people. But I'd look at the demographics locally to see what that is, because that would have shifted on now in terms of what that looks like.
Nick?
Yeah, thanks. Couple of things actually on that point around that sort of campaigning to reopen, I suppose, is because a lot of figures around social value and the 6-7 million quid of social value impact that from the activities. So presumably there's a way of assessing the loss of social value because of the closures that could be used to strengthen an argument. That's just a thought that
you can look at the figures that are in one of the back end of those reports. I kind of feel that I may well send you all to sleep if I read through every site specific social value, but there is a breakdown there in terms of what the rolling 12-month figures was for Fanshawe.
Yeah.
So you can kind of deduce from that. So with social value, it requires people to come twice a week, and it requires people to be over the age of 16. So it doesn't necessarily pick up a high score at the dual use sites, which probably doesn't work overtly in their favour. But certainly from those figures, it will give you an idea in terms of what that engagement was. The challenge is with the dual use sites is the school had that from 9 till 3:30. So in terms of the kind of data capture that we had, it was only from users that were coming in for their fitness memberships. So it doesn't necessarily tell a true story, if I'm going to be honest and transparent.
Yeah. No, just a thought in terms of data available to show the impact of closures. Just on a sort of broader point, because the stats look great. You see the generally the level of increase and expansion and is really good. I suppose it's sort of linked a bit to the question around sort of capacity, because ultimately are the stats good? They look good, but so do we sort of have set ourselves targets? Are we on track to where we thought we were going to be? Are the sorts of activities and the costs of running those activities where we thought they were going to be? We might have had a huge impact, a huge increase in an area, but it's cost 5 times as much as we thought it's going to. All things like that. I'm just trying to gauge how we get assurance around whether the stats are as good as they look.
Understandable. This is significantly higher than I think that we would have first thought. So unfortunately, because the area that I think you'll probably want to know about is the commercial sensitivity in terms of what we're doing and what not. That's not something that we can discuss in an open forum. And when we kind of met later on last week, if we need a session where we talk about those things that necessarily can't be discussed in the public realm, I'm more than happy to say that. I can assure you that, well, I hope the council are very happy with the numbers that we're producing and the return that we're giving the council back from a financial perspective.
Yeah, that's certainly part of it. And so I did note, so in the plan around what comes to the committee, it does talk about this report covering performance as against the business case and making a return to the council after servicing debt. So that commercial side, which I understand is not in this forum, but keen to understand where that's conversation happens, because that is the other side of all this great stuff is, are we using the funds in the most value added way, delivering the maximum amount of social impact, positive social impact that we can.
Sorry, can I just clarify? We pay a management fee to run the facilities on behalf of the council.
Yeah.
So we're in a situation that we've provided surplus for that. So financially, we're in a situation where there's additional returns coming back to the council, which reflects how well we're performing.
Which is great, and that's part of the that performance, and that's not in this report, so I wasn't aware. I didn't know that, so but that's great to hear. And it's just
we're limited to what we can talk about when we start to talk about commercial sensitivities. What we've offered is we want to kind of sit outside of the public forum and talk about what that looks like on a balance sheet. We can have that conversation if that's something that the group feel at a certain point would be a benefit.
Fine. I'm just pointing out the paper and the documentation says that's what the committee should include in its assessment. So just raising it as a point of where does that happen?
Certainly, thank you, Nick. Brian.
Thank you, Chair. So obviously, as part of the budget setting report that went out to members back in February time, part of the savings package that was built into that programme was a increase in what we class as profit share from the leisure contract, which is obviously way above what the management fee was. So within that, and again, top of my head, I think it was 100k we built into that. So it shows that, you know, where obviously we were anticipating this was coming through. So, you know, it's on track to where we anticipate it to be. Obviously, as part of the quarterly monitoring reports, out-term reports, if obviously, you know, we achieve greater than what we have budgeted for, that'll be highlighted in those reports. Likewise, if we don't get as much as we anticipated, again, it will be highlighted in those reports as and when necessary.
Thank you, Brian. Any more for any more? No. So the recommendation is clearly to review and receive the annual leisure contract performance report 2024 as set out by the service leisure provider. Could I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Proposer, Jeffrey, thank you. Seconder, Sue, thank you very much. Can we vote on that? Those in favour? That's unanimous again. Thank you. So before we move on, I mean, you're free to stay or you're free to go. It's entirely up to you. It's the same with you, Sarah. Obviously, you know, no problem at all. Thank you very much. So the next agenda item is the annual assurance statement and internal audit annual report 24-25. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. This annual report summarises internal audit activity and outcomes for 2024-25, bringing it all together under an annual assurance opinion at page 28 of your report pack. The reasonable assurance opinion reflects a generally positive position, albeit that opinion being influenced by one limited assurance report. Further details of individual audit outcomes are provided in the tables on page 31, including comparison to the year before, and in the supporting appendix starting at page 36. As I'm sure you'll appreciate, there's also quite a lot of narrative in the report, which I won't go through in detail. In summary, it describes what internal audit does, how it does it, and more importantly, why. The report also shows the framework of quality assurance that is implied to how we operate, and a bit about the global internal audit standards against which we're reporting general compliance. There's also content at pages 33 and 34, which shows how the service fared against its key performance indicators for last year. They're almost met without exception. And there's also some details of main service developments that took place last year, such as securing new business outside of Hertfordshire. Later in the report, there's an audit charter for 2025-26. This document is effectively a terms of reference or mandate for internal audit and how it operates. So, for example, it sets out the authority and responsibilities that the service has to the council. The charter is reviewed and annually approved by this committee, which is why we're asking you to do it again. You may like to note that it's almost unchanged from last year, apart from an amendment in paragraph 6.1, where the list of those the client audit manager has access to, should they require it, has increased. And a paragraph 6.3, which now references an opportunity for members of the committee to oversee the role of the client audit manager, which is something new. Most of the agenda item is for noting, except for the charter, which, as I said earlier, members are asked to approve. There is also a technical requirement for management to confirm or otherwise to the committee that the scope and resources of internal audit last year were not subject to inappropriate limitations. Traditionally, the Council's Chief Finance Officer provides that response when asked to do so by the committee chair. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you there, Simon. Questions, comments? Well, Sue.
I just wondered, with the premises licensing, you are only able to issue a level of limited assurance. I wonder if those difficulties have been resolved. I think, was it to do with record keeping?
It was to do with record keeping, but the absence of and condition of that record keeping ultimately had an impact on the status of licenses that were already in place. We've had assurances in terms of a management action plan, a management response to the recommendations that we've made. At this point, we consider that that recommendation has been implemented, but we're relying upon management assurance for that purpose. As we usually do, we'll be following that audit up in the coming months to actually verify that that is the case.
Thank you. And generally, do you have good communication level with all the different departments? There's sort of no operating difficulties that make your job more difficult for you?
No, generally speaking, it's very good. I have regular liaison meetings with the Council's Chief Finance Officer, Ryan, going forward. We've got dates in the diary. But on a regular basis, I also have catch-ups with what were formerly the heads of service of the Council. So I've got quite good contacts with the audit sponsors as we define them. Perhaps inevitably, when we come to actually do the audit field work itself, we're reliant upon engagement from those that have a day job to do. Like anything of an internal audit nature, this becomes an additional piece of work for those that we're working with. We make a series of information requests to help us reach the judgments that we do, and we're reliant upon the time and effort of staff, as you might imagine, to provide that when we need it. By and large, we can deliver the work when we agree to it. We have a timetable, so people know it's coming. But from time to time, inevitably, pieces do get delayed, but we pick them up later in the year.
Thank you very much. Any more questions or comments? I have one, just around the charter. Who are the key stakeholders to the development of the charter? Is it purely yourselves, or is it us and others?
The contents of the charter, if I can define it in that way, the it essentially follows a template which is directed by the Global Internal Audit Standards. All of the features, the way in which an internal audit service operates should be reflected in that charter. What we do, how we do it, and why we do it. And that's why we ask this committee to ultimately approve it. It provides us with the level endorsement that we need to carry out our work should we need to fall back on it at any time.
Okay, I suppose what I was alluding to really was whether we're a contributor and whether we sort of influence in any way the charter, or whether this is totally independent of the council.
I guess ultimately you don't get the opportunity to influence it if the content is driven externally, and it falls upon the Shared Internal Audit Service to provide that charter for member approval on an annual basis. So it's effectively internally produced, and members are asked to endorse it.
Excellent, thank you. No more questions, and I'm going to read these out because they're obviously very specific. There's 4 recommendations. The members are recommended to note the annual assurance statement and internal audit annual report for 24-25, to note the results of the self-assessment required by the Global Internal Audit Standards and the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme. The third one is approve the SIAS Audit Charter for 25-26. And we'll also be seeking assurance from Brian that the scope and the resources for the internal audit were not subject to inappropriate limitations in 24-25. So I suppose just seeking the verbal assurance now.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, I can confirm there's been no limitations placed on internal audit in relation to scope or resources for 24-25.
Thank you very much, Brian. I'm after a proposer and a seconder for this. Jeffrey, again, thank you very much. And a seconder, Sue, thank you very much. Could we have a show of hands on that? Those in favour, please. That is unanimous and carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brian. Yeah. Agenda item 8 here. The provision outturn 23-24, 23-24 draft statements of accounts. Is this you, Carl? Brian. Alison, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. This report presents the 23-24 provisional outturn and draft statement of accounts. Both items are provisional at this stage as they are subject to external audit. As highlighted in the report and at previous audit and governance meetings, both the 23-24 outturn and draft statement of accounts have been subject to significant delays due to ongoing audits of 21-22 and 22-23, capacity issues within the finance team, and reviews of age debt, minimum revenue provision, capitalisation of interest. As at the last audit and governance meeting, the audit's now complete for 21-22 and 22-23, and all the reviews mentioned have now taken place. And the impacts of these reviews are reflected in the statement of accounts presented tonight and the outturn position. The 23-24 outturn position shows a £224,000 revenue underspend. This has been transferred to reserves to fund future overspends and is reflected within the figures presented. I would like to highlight that the figures presented are over a year old. Work is currently ongoing to produce the 24-25 provisional outturn, which will be provided at the next audit and governance meeting. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Alison. Questions, comments? Jeffrey.
Thank you. I was hoping somebody else might ask a question because I'm struggling to find the section I wanted to refer to. It does relate to the overall net position. for the outturn. I mean, it's good news that we have got an underspend. Although it seems quite a considerable underspend. It was the funding I wanted to ask about, because there did seem to be quite a variance, sort of 3 million or so on the funding, which I believe is put down to sort of council tax and business rate collection. Sorry, I can't find it, so I'm doing this from memory. Is the variance because of changes to what we anticipated during the year, or because put it bluntly, we kind of miscalculated at the outset?
So the paragraph you're referring to is 3.1 in the report, which shows the movement between the funding. In the budget, we had 5.3 million estimated in funding, and our outturn was 8.6 million, as you say, a circa £3 million movement. The majority of that is the impact of the deficit or a surplus on the collection fund. We'd budgeted for that there would be a deficit on the business rates collection fund as at the end of 23-24. That estimate was put in place the previous November. When we actually got to the end of 23-24, changes in the appeals provision, so less appeals were coming forward and there was less impact on our accounts, so we pulled some out of our appeals provision, which had this then big swing, and we moved from a budgeted deficit position into a surplus position, which has resulted in this large movement on our funding. However, as you will see from the line above in table 1, we are moving a lot of that into our reserves to then cover us for future swings in the collection fund, both council tax and business rates.
Thank you. That sounds very fair. Thank you.
Any more questions, Nick?
Yeah, I can't remember when the 23-20, whether this committee's seen the 23-24 outturn. I haven't, no. Okay, because my question was going to be whether these numbers, these sort of more final numbers, if you like, are any different to previous ones. But since they haven't been as previous sets, then my question's redundant.
Yeah, Brian.
So we are hopeful that we will be bringing the final 23-24 accounts back to this committee in September, once the auditors have obviously reviewed and obviously did what they need to do in relation to the 23-24, which will be a very minimal audit, because obviously we've missed the backstop, so obviously they are looking to do what they need to do around the value for money aspects, and everything else will just be disclaimed as the previous audits.
Thank you, Brian. Any more questions or comments? No, that's very good. Thank you very much. So the recommendations before us are that we note the general fund revenue outturn of 224,000 underspend to be transferred to the general reserve, and we note the capital outturn position, and we also received the 23-24 draft statement of accounts. Could I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Sue, thank you very much. And then Jeffrey, seconder. Yeah, thank you. And a show of hands, please. Those in favour? Thank you. That is unanimous and carried. So the next one, Alison again, is it? That's the accounting policies 24-25.
Thank you, Chair. This report presents the accounting policies that will be used in the production of the 24-25 Statement of Accounts. Agreement of appropriate accounting policies helps the authority fulfil its statutory duty to prepare its Statement of Accounts. In line with current legislation, the Code of Practice on Local Authority Accounting and International Financial Reporting Standards. The Appendix A shows all the accounting policies that will follow in production of the Statement of Accounts. There's been minimal changes to previous years, mainly in presentation and slight changes in wording. Yeah, so any questions, I'm happy to take them.
That's very succinct. Thank you. Questions, comments? Oh, Jeffrey.
Well, my only comment is that if they're unchanged from, well, mostly unchanged from previous year, I'm happy to accept them.
Certainly, thank you. Any more comments? Okay. So on that basis, there is one recommendation, and that is the accounting policies set out in the Appendix A be approved for use in the 24-25 Statement of Accounts. Can I please have a proposer and seconder? Thank you, sir. Proposer and a seconder. Oh, Chris, thank you. We're short of numbers tonight, I know. A show of hands, please, in favour. That's unanimous and carried. Thank you very much. Next one, monitoring of the 24-25 Q4 Corporate Risk Register, and that is Brian.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is the update on the Q4 24-25 Corporate Risk Register. A review has been carried out by the leadership team to ascertain whether there's been any changes to the scores associated with those risks, whether there's been any changes to the mitigations and actions being taken to date. I can confirm that there's been no changes to the scores, to the and obviously there's been no new risks being included or any risks being deleted. We did consider a risk around the local government reorganisation, LGR, but we felt at this time it was still too early in the process to actually include as a risk, partly because we've still got a lot of unknowns around what's going to happen, but also around there's very limited of what actions we can actually control in that process. So again, it's on our radar, but it's not been included so far in our risk register. This will be going up to executive on the 3rd of June. So obviously if this committee got any comments or any suggestions or any amendments, then obviously we can take that forward to executive for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Comments, questions? Nick?
Yeah, just one comment on the risk or compliance risks. So the issues that have challenged us around compliance with the accounts and getting audit done and the like, and the mitigations that we've now put in place for that through resourcing the team and sorting out other issues to get us back on track. Whether it will be a good to capture that within the governance risk, to show that we're on the case, and it sort of keeps it live, and we can sort of continually monitor whether our mitigations are adequate as we see the accounts and get back on track with that compliance.
Thank you for the question. It's partly probably covered in the first risk around financial resources, but it also will be covered as part of reporting to council in May, following the audit committee paper around the 3 statutory recommendations. And from that report that went to council, it was recommended that regular reports will come back to this committee, specifically looking at those risks and those issues to make sure that we are taking action. So they will be coming back to this committee in due course on a regular basis to reduce those potential risks going forward.
Thank you. Any more questions? If there's no more questions, I've got one point about the target dates and whether there's any way of populating these within the table on page 166. Is that possible for the next time we have an outing on these? Good. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. If there's no more questions, then I will say that the recommendation is the 24-25 Q4 corporate risk register and actions being taken to control and mitigate risk be noted. A proposer and seconder, please. Jeffrey, proposer and seconder. Chris, thank you. Thank you very much. We have a show of hands on that. Those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That's carried. Right. So we've done item 12. Oh, no, we haven't. Sorry. We've got 11, yes. So item 11, social value policy 25 to 2030. And this is you again, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the refresh update to the last policy that came to members back in 2021. The next version should have come back last year in 2024, but due to the changes in legislation on procurement, the procurement strategy that went up recently to members, it was left until all those were implemented and agreed. So this policy now reflects all the latest changes to the procurement strategy, to the corporate strategy, and obviously in relation to the legislation that was implemented in February this year. Council has also reviewed the TOMs within the actual social policy, which is the themes, objectives and methods. We have greatly reduced down the number of TOMs to be used going forward, and that was following a review of the policy with all service areas that obviously undertake procurement activities. So we've now reduced it down to the 23 that is reported within the report. Obviously, just want to highlight that obviously the evaluation criteria for social value is applied to all procurement in band 3 and above. So that, in other words, anything over £100,000, we will obviously look at social value. The majority there's the majority will be based around 10%, but there is the opportunity to increase this if the pre-market engagement makes it clear that this is of greater importance. Obviously, we've got to bear in mind that if we increase the weightings on that, it may have an impact on the cost associated with those procurements as well. So again, we do assess it on a case-by-case basis to make sure it's the best reflective of what we are looking to achieve. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Brian. Comments, questions, members? Sue.
Yeah, I wanted to say I welcome the possible suggestion of social value being attributed to major planning applications. This has a potential mitigating the harm further on local communities, particularly speculative development. That's a really welcome suggestion. I hope that can be implemented as part of the district plan going forward. I wondered what sort of penalties might be in place for contractors not fulfilling their social policy, and how they'll be monitored that they're not keeping to their targets.
That will be based within the actual contract that was actually signed between the two parties. If obviously there's if during evaluation that they've built in the social value aspects, that will be weighted and scored in that purpose. And obviously, if they don't achieve that, there'll be obviously within the actual contract consequences around what the penalties would be. But again, it'll be based on a case-by-case basis, depending on that individual contract.
Any more questions, comments? Chris?
It's a little bit of an odd question. You might have the answer. It might not even be for you, but I just following on from Councillor Nichols' question about social value and planning applications. Do we kind of look at the reverse? Do we look at the kind of like we look at the kind of contribution in terms of positive, but do we then make evaluations of what the cost of the council would be if it was the opposite, and in actual fact their actions were detrimental in some way? let me say, on balance, the social policy, you know, the social value for this would be here, but the social detriment would be here. Is that do we do that kind of evaluation?
I think obviously I don't know the precise answer to that, but what I would say is that obviously when we look at each procurement, we will determine whether it is suitable to have social values incorporated into those or not. And obviously, you know, where it is suitable to be included, then we would include it. But you know, if there is a detrimental impact, then obviously it would be considered at that pre-contract stage of whether we would go out to tender with any social values associated, it depending on that situation.
Sue?
Yeah, I'm just thinking adding social values is going to add a cost to contractors putting forward applications. I wonder if that will be how much that would be a deterrent to certain people, companies.
So this has already been in place since 2021. So it's there, available, and is used for contracts. Like I said, it's done on a case by case basis, and obviously the pre-market conditions would then determine whether it's suitable to be used on those particular ones. So yeah, there might well be a cost implicated, but again, it would be looked at in the whole to see what is best for the contract.
Any more? No, I have one question again, I'm afraid. I presume a lot of this is taken from historical, the previous version. But as a council, do we have much latitude in how we define social value, or is that pretty much prescribed?
So there is guidance out there within the social value portal that we can obviously use as a basis, but obviously we can then determine which ones we use. And obviously what we've identified in those 23, I think there is ones that we've picked out from a list of possible ones or what we could use. So yeah, we can determine what we want to use or don't want to use.
Certainly. Okay, thank you very much. No further questions or comments. The recommendation for the committee is to approve the draft social value policy for 25 to 30 set out in Appendix A. A proposer and a seconder, please. Proposer Sue and seconder Jeffrey. Thank you very much. Can we have a show of hands? Those in favour? It's unanimous and carried. Right, we move on to item 13, the work programme.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the follows on from last month's work programme. It's pretty much the same. It's slightly tweaked whenever we can update it. What I have done and included in this version on the last page, which I've got a page number 4, it's like 207, it's a table right at the bottom around the statement of accounts and when they are due to be published, when they're due to be audited. I think members obviously asked last time that they didn't have that, and so they couldn't actually challenge officers if they were late or not. So again, that's now been included for 23-24 onwards, and you can see for 24-25, we need to publish the 24-25 accounts by the end of June, which is again we are currently on target for. The other piece is around I've looked at the work programme for the year, and obviously this won't impact on this financial year, but it will impact on 26-27. And what I'm proposing, and obviously I've just recently sent to the chair a proposal around having 5 meetings a year, which will be, I'm trying to remember top of my head now, I think it's July, September, November, January and April. Will be the 5 dates, and then there will also be the ONS stroke A&G meeting on the budget scrutiny in January. And obviously what I'm trying to do is just get agreement with each of the report authors of when they're looking to bring their reports. So again, it's with the chair. Obviously, once we've had that discussion to go through that, if he's happy, I can bring that back to the next meeting for your information. But again, it's just trying to bring it into one page to make it even. So that's all I've got to say really on this at the moment.
Yes, thank you. I must admit the table you did show was very concise. So it did things, you know, in a way a table should. Listed all the things we need to do and listed the months we need to do them. So it was actually quite a good plan, and we'll obviously that'll be brought to the meeting at some point. I assume the next meeting. Yeah. Questions on the current program then, or comments? Anything, Jeffrey?
Well, just a comment, please, Chair. I mean, it is extremely helpful to have the dates, so thank you very much indeed for adding those. That certainly gives some clarity. And also very pleased that the suggestion that we may have a slightly rejigged schedule from the next financial year going forward, and reinstating, possibly reinstating the joint scrutiny meeting that we certainly had 2 years ago. Yeah. So yeah, very good, very positive news. Thank you.
Thank you there, Jeffrey. Any more comments, Sue?
I just wondered if any suggestions for training.
We talked about it last month, and obviously we are looking to obviously provide the necessary training around treasury management, which is one of the statutory ones. Obviously, we're looking at providing internal audit, anti-fraud, and some risks training. Obviously, if members then have any additional training on top of that to assist you in doing your role here, you know, on audit and governance, and obviously I can take it away and look into as well.
Thank you. Any more, Nick?
Just, I suppose repeating the point I made earlier, but so just going back to the leisure report and the description of the report that we got is not what's described in the plan, which is assessment against the business case and the return. So I was just keen that we clarify that point, and related to that, there's the Beam report, which is similar around report on business case and the return from that, and is that what we are going to receive, or does that happen somewhere else? Because that sort of assessment of how well how the performance is doing against expectations, which is the bit for me that's just missing on both of those. And a slight aside, the Beam is listed for 2 consecutive meetings. So I think it's repeated. So I think we've got a duplication in November, in September and November. I'd love to hear it twice, but
Okay.
Yeah, yes, it is enticing, and apologies for that. It's only being once. I will clarify which one it should be in. I believe it's coming to September, but I will just clarify that. And that will be obviously more of a update around performance. Obviously that will feed into the 24-25 outturn report as well.
Yes.
That would have come out across the whole organisation. Again, whether that needs to be a part 2 or part 1, we'll need to look at and assess what information is included in that, so that, you know, members got the right information to make that decision.
Thank you. Just sorry to pick up on Nick's point, and thinking about it. Well, I suppose the angle that we're going from is, instead of it being a take by the managers of the sports centres or whatever, it's actually a council perspective as to whether we've met the business case. That's probably more as opposed to the metrics that the management company is.
Yes, I think so. Yes, it comes back to whether that performance, which sounds great, is what was planned. And it may be that, so it's not just the commercials necessarily. The commercials are important, and that may come up through the reporting of outturn and the budgetary monitoring, and whether the financials are on target for whichever activity. But it's more around whether, so we're spending the money, are we getting what we anticipated, and the assessment of whether we're getting good value from that, or whether we're focusing on the right things, whether the money could be spent differently to get better outcomes. That sort of conversation really that just felt a bit of a gap in that conversation earlier. But having said all that, it did sound really great, and all the performance does sound good, but it's just that assurance that it is that it is meeting the expectation and indeed exceeding the plan.
So just come back on the leisure one. So obviously, as Dan mentioned earlier in his report, that they actually pay us. So obviously, the operation is making a surplus before, and obviously on top of that, we then get a share of the profit of anything above that, which is obviously again what I reported on earlier around we built in as part of the savings package for 25-26. So that you could say that is it's achieving or going beyond what it's actually was budgeted to achieve in year. So I'm not sure we can do much more on that one. Obviously on the beam, yes, I think we should be coming back with obviously a business case around, you know, this was the business case, this is what we've achieved to date based on the operations of that. So I think it's completely two different things, I think.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. So I suppose then is it so on the leisure centres is whether so that's great. The financials are looking good. I suppose do we set the contractor a target to deliver a certain number of memberships or active members and is that part of the sort of that side of the commercial conversation? Are they delivering what we would have presumably contracted for them to do on our behalf?
I think that will be a discussion with maybe the director of place, Sarah Saunders, when she's back from leave, because obviously it's her responsibility. Leadership's under her remit. And I presume she will have monthly, quarterly meetings with the operator to make sure they are performing. Again, I don't know whether there's any indicators associated with those or not, but again, Sarah will be able to advise on that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any more comments, questions? So the recommendation is we approve the work programme set out in this report, and obviously that will evolve in the next sessions as well, and to specify any training requirements, which I think we touched on, which has been mentioned. Could I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Proposer Sue and seconder Jeffrey. Thank you. Show of hands, those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Ooh, we're finished. Urgent items. No urgent items. On that basis, if there's no urgent items, I conclude tonight's meeting at 8:43. Thank you and good night.